You need it. So call to order.
Yes.
It would be great. I'd like to open the meeting of the MBTA subcommittees on the Thursday, March 28th, 2024. I apologize, I lost my voice, so I sound more raspy. All right, now that we've opened it, Rob, do you want to comment or kick off the meeting? Go away.
Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, my apologies, Rob, before you start, my apologies for the members here. I had a request from the audience if we could speak into our microphones because they were having difficulty hearing everybody. So if you don't mind just pulling those a little bit closer.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry, Rob.
That works.
Oh, no problem. No, as long as you,
Yeah.
everybody can hear me in the audience as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, perfect. If I have to yell, I will yell. So I guess I believe, received some information from the consultant, if my memory serves me correct, which I believe at the last meeting, we had a couple areas that we wanted to specifically look at to see if they would basically, if they would conform to the regulations for the MBTA overlay. It sounds like they do, if I'm not mistaken, based on the information we received. However, there is the requirement about the half of the required area needs to be contiguous, which would mean a minimum of 25 acres needs to be contiguous, and we don't have that with the two areas that we initially looked at. So we would either have to, I guess, two options. Option A, expand upon one of those areas, which I think is doable, or option B is try and find another area that is contiguous 25 acres. Are we all in agreement that that's where we're at? I think that's, I don't know, Liz, Bill.
No, I think you summarized it very well. Last time we spent a lot of time with the consultant discussing the fact that we can put the overlay district over existing structures. And we spent a lot of time talking about the area surrounding the Curtis, the area surrounding the Charles, given that dense housing is already in those areas and what our options might be for that. So we learned a lot from the consultant in our last meeting in regards to what is possible, but I do think she examined the areas that we asked her to and found that they would meet the criteria if we can find a contiguous area of 25 acres minimum. So I think that's where we left off. And I believe Amy, you and Dennis have further discussed some things with the consultant in regards to what we asked her to look at.
Yeah, do you want me to? Yeah,
Sure,
so
that would be great.
after the meeting, we did take a look at the parcels that we discussed, which were the Curtis. And the Curtis apartment complex is about 17 acres. It has a parcel that's contiguous to it that is owned by WS Development, I believe. For the most part, it's not buildable. Some people would remember it as the Kierstead parcel. It was owned by a gentleman by the name of Tommy Kierstead, and it's right next door to the Curtis.
Is that the old garage or?
They purchased it with the idea towards having access to the hill property out back. Was the idea that they had when they developed the Curtis, actually. I'm saying the Curtis, I'm sorry, I mean the Charles.
Okay.
So it's a parcel that wraps around the Charles, and it is approximately 31 acres. The majority of it is wetlands. So the majority of it would be developable, but the two parcels combined the Charles parcel and this parcel. Rob, if you're looking at it, I don't want to be daring and go to screen share here, but we were looking at it with the consultant earlier. But it's the parcel that's directly located behind the Charles. So if you look at this right now.
Yeah, do you want me to screen share?
Yeah, can you screen share? That would be great.
Yeah, that would be great. Let me let Pam.
We were doing it earlier and going over it with the consultant. That would be super.
I'll let Pam know too, but she can all the shares.
While Rob pulls that up, Dennis, did the consultant mention anything about concerns from a backlash from the Attorney General about choosing a parcel that's not really buildable?
No, as a matter of fact, she indicated that it is what a lot of communities are doing now. If they're looking at parcels like that, and you can see that this is the so this is the Charles right here. Okay. And then this is the parcel that I was referring to, and at one time WS kept this because they thought they would want to access back here, but they abandoned that and they no longer have the hill property under control. But this parcel right here, you can see the majority of it is wetland, so it wouldn't count as developable land. The consultant had said, and what we knew was that the only part of this that would count as developable land is just a little bit piece right here. But what's important is the two parcels combined equal in excess of the 25 acres. So it would punch that requirement that we have at least 25 acres of a single parcel or combined parcels that are contiguous, which is what this is. So theoretically, this could be one of the parcels. The two combined equal about 49 acres. But the only part that would count towards our 50 acres are the Charles and this little bit of upland here, which only accounts for about 20 acres.
But it gets us to where we want to be.
It gets the 25 acre requirement.
Okay.
So then to get 50 acres of developable, what we would have to look at is we'd have to look at the Charles. Rob, did you have any questions on what I was just talking about?
No, I think, so basically, can you see my cursor?
Yep, I do.
So that's the developable area that,
Yeah, it's not even quite what you're referring to, because by the time you get outside the 100 foot and everything else, really, you're probably talking about a very limited amount there, but that's something that we could ask the consultant. I mean, that's her job. She could take a look at that and figure out what is developable. But even if very, very little of it was developable, it all comes into play with what we identify for, for the maximum amount of, per acre, development that we provide for.
Clarification.
Yep.
Contiguous does not mean it has to be one consistent owner. You
No.
give me two parcels of land that are right next to each other with different owners.
Correct.
I just want to clarify that.
Yep. Yeah. So the nice thing about this is that it's already developed. So we know what's there. Theoretically, somebody could tear all these down and put something up. That's why I say it's one option for us to consider. This is, you have to remember that is possible. So just like if we zoned an existing plaza somewhere, theoretically, somebody could tear it down and, the likelihood of that happening is, probably slim. Who knows, maybe 15 years from now, when they were built in 2000, maybe by 2040 or 2045, somebody will say, let's knock them down. But that's something for us to consider anyway. The nice thing about it, as I say, we know what's there. It's already there. And by the way, the density on that, with what's there right now, and if it were 15 units per acre, is about what's there right now on the Charles.
So that was gonna be my question, what the density?
That's about what it is.
Okay.
But what we would have to keep in mind is we'd be looking at all of the upland and coming up with a formula that addresses all of the upland, and that's what the consultant would have to do. She'd look at it and say, okay, based on this and this amount of upland, and what your requirements are, it's 10 units per acre, which would make us have to have greater density at another parcel, or maybe it would be 15 per acre, but that's kind of one of the thoughts that we had. Rob, any other questions on that one?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if, I'm not sure if we would have to encompass the entire lot or if we could just do a portion of the lot that we would deem developable.
Yep. That's a good question. I'm not, she didn't suggest otherwise. But she did say this was a reasonable approach, understanding that we couldn't say, okay, we got 49 acres because we know the majority of that larger parcel isn't developable as wetland. But it does get us, the big question was, does it satisfy the 25 acre requirement? And she said absolutely did, was the answer that she gave us. Obviously, she'll have to do her evaluation, but if this is one possibility, this and combined with the other piece that we're gonna look at, we could have her evaluate that, and if we find something else that we want to have evaluated, we can have that evaluated as well. It's kind of the luxury of being a little ahead of it, but the nice thing about this is that it's already there, so it's not like we're fear of the unknown, where our neighborhood has to worry about what's 300 units gonna look like in our backyard,
Yeah, I agree. I think that approach is great to try and get this overlay on something that's already developed.
So if we go down, Rob, and look at the Curtis.
Sure. Where am I? Whoops. I believe
Yep,
this.
that's it right there.
Yeah, this is the Curtis area. Let me go back to the other.
So if we take the Curtis and they have control of these 3 parcels as well, so if we took this whole parcel, that parcel is about 17.1 acres. So that parcel plus the developable land, we think there's enough developable land on that other one we were looking at to get us our 50 acres of developable property. And again, this is already developed with the exception of these 3 in front, which ideally what they'd like to do is put another 80 units there. So worst case, that would be our exposure, and that's something that they've talked a little bit about in the past. If you go down there, you'll see those three properties, and it could work nicely to finish that whole area. So that would be our exposure if we were to look at those 2 parcels. So Amy and I and Tim looked at that today with the consultant, and that was one option we had talked about. I know at the last meeting about what would it look like if we took those 2 plus the Oakwoods, but we don't even have to get into the Oakwoods. We think we have enough just with those 2 parcels.
What is next to the Curtis?
What is next to the Curtis here?
Any way we can get to, the area behind the trampoline park with contiguous acres?
You could, but you don't, that certainly is an option that you couldn't get not without this. So essentially what you'd have to do is you'd probably have to include, yeah, I suppose you could go, because you're looking at this. You might be able to figure out a way if these 3 were joined with this and then this combined with this, it wouldn't get you your 25, because this is about 6 acres, I think.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
wouldn't quite get you there, but what you could do is you could include, this plus this plus this. But, I mean, the possibility of maybe them taking this down and putting up housing,
okay.
could be there, but certainly, it's certainly another alternative.
The easier route is the first route you mentioned.
Only because it's already there, like we talked at the last meeting, it's not, there's no fear of what's it gonna look like. Well, it's already there, unless at some point in time they tear it down and decide to put something else up.
And I think we'd run into issues with the Attorney General because the trampoline building is technically industrial zoned,
Yeah.
which,
That's what
she's
Central.
she's discouraging overlaying this
Yeah,
on industrial zones.
and the good thing, this is already
She's not asking me.
She wasn't muted. Oh, she's muted. Sorry about that.
No worries.
No, that wasn't.
I was like, oh, I don't know why
No.
she cares.
Yeah, well, I think what they don't wanna do is they don't want you to site housing in the middle of, a toxic, chemical plant and a paving company and
Right,
say, okay,
right.
it is our housing, because it's not credible.
Yeah,
no one's
yeah.
gonna wanna live in a
I think
heavily
this is true.
industrialized area.
I think this sounds like it meets the requirements.
Yeah, and certainly, the committee may want to look at other alternatives as well, but this is one. If the committee would like, we could have the consultant go ahead and do her due diligence. I mean, she has a contract to exactly do this sort of thing, so we might as well put her to work and have her, at least evaluate it and come back to us. And let us know, what she thinks. In the meantime, we can also, if the committee wants, talk about other properties in town. I know there's an audience here tonight that may have questions for us as well.
Well, I think the discussion surrounds whether we want to promote more development beyond this, which is the intent of the overlay. So I think that's a discussion worthy of having. But as with anything, whatever we decide, you have to expect that someday someone will build there because it's allowable.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Much like you were saying, if we, let's say, designated 3 plazas in North Bellingham, saying, oh, it's commercially zoned. Well, someday somebody may decide to put 750 housing units on that commercial property, and then we lose the value of the commercial property. And
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to move forward.
We're just, we're
Have
evaluating.
have her evaluate that one.
Have her evaluate and throw it through her calculation.
Sure. And
I agree. And I think it seems like the biggest hurdle too is it's not necessarily getting the model to work with your areas. I think it's more of the interpretation of whether or not these conform to the regulations that the Attorney General wants us to conform to. And the thing that's really nice about this idea, especially with the Curtis apartments, is that the intent of this zoning change is to allow accessibility to MBTA stations. And this is pretty much as close as you're gonna get to the MBTA station that Bellingham is required to, or that's really tripping the requirement for Bellingham to meet the. So, I mean, I think it's a slam dunk personally, and if we can get it in an area that's already developed, because I know that there is concerns in Bellingham with the amount of development that you've seen. So I think it's a very good option.
And I think also, if in fact that frontage parcel, if there is another building put there, and it's only 80 units, I mean, that's our exposure. It shows good faith too. We are creating some new housing as well, just not 750 units,
And it'll fit in
I'm sure
well
that's
over
something
there.
the landowner would be interested in.
If everybody's comfortable with that option, I also just wanted to read into the record, Sahin had something he wanted to just share tonight because he wasn't able to be here. Because he's not feeling well, but he wanted me to just let you know that I'm just gonna read to you what he put. He
Sure.
believes, that he wants to get the acreage numbers, and for the future, he would like to see Bellingham Plaza next to the Mill Street in Oakwood area to be considered to be added to our list. But he will leave it up to the board, to look into that, and basically, sorry, he can't be here, but he would like to look at that area as well.
Yeah, behind the Dairy Queen.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I agree with that. I know Rob probably has a bit of do we want to open it up to the audience first, Rob, to kind of talk about these parcels, and then we can talk about the Bellingham Plaza?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so,
I know Mr. Harkey was here as well. He's been at the last couple of meetings when we met. Mr. Moore was at the last one as well, and I think Mr. Harkey wanted to introduce himself, I think, as much as anything.
I did whenever, but I just didn't know when I should do that.
Yeah, do we wanna, well, why don't we open it up to questions about these particular parcels that Mr. Frayne has, proposed to the group, for evaluation from the consultant? Love to hear anyone in the audience if you have thoughts on that. I know, those of you in the second row weren't at the last meeting, so I think there's a little bit of catch up going on. Like we were all informed that, the overlay can go over existing structures, which I think we knew intuitively. But this would allow for the overlay to remain in areas where we already have this type of housing, as opposed to putting it on open land in areas that we've never had dense housing before. So that, I think, was the subcommittee's impetus for asking the consultant to look into these parcels. So it sounds as if we get the right amount of acreage, combined, it'll meet the criteria, but that doesn't mean we're not going to look at other areas in town. So, happy to open it up for questions or comments. Yes,
I'm curious about something. So we have to build so many units, correct?
we don't have to build any units at all. This is just a zoning overlay requirement. There's no production requirement.
So we go through all of this just for the zoning, and then we meet the state requirements?
Yes,
Simply designation.
yeah.
Yes.
There's no requirement for the production.
But the state's hope is that this will incite more development for housing. It's not requiring that.
Sounded a lot better than it did when I first heard it.
Oh, okay.
We had a revelation last week as well, or our last meeting as well, in that we didn't think that we could put the zoning over an existing apartment complex that already has that density. It's already there.
So technically, we could just add to Curtis and add to,
Allow for the addition to Curtis.
we don't have to do it.
Yeah.
but-
Doesn't mean we have to add to it.
Right, but it means we can.
Yes,
We're putting an overlay
Part
over
of
it,
it.
yep.
so it can be added to.
Fine. And there's already, between those two, almost 600 units. Worst case is only 150 units as opposed to
Much better than
750.
what I originally heard.
Same with us, sir.
Yeah, yeah, we all asked the consultant last time, you're sure this isn't some sort of
Yeah.
trick or, yeah. So, and as Dennis mentioned, there are a lot of towns are doing the same. Chelmsford came out and said, we're putting our zoning overlay over an apartment building that Trammell Crow just broke ground on. They, a developer that I've worked with had said they wanted their parcels or their empty office buildings to be considered for redevelopment, and the town said, no, we're not gonna put it there. So there are a lot of towns that are trying to limit this overlay district to areas where there's already dense housing, which I think is a good option. I mean, Dennis said this, there always is the risk that the owner could demolish what's there and rebuild something potentially denser. But we don't feel that's the case with the Curtis, as it's 4 years old, and the Charles isn't that old either. So we think the likelihood of something like that occurring in the near term is limited.
And I think to your point, Liz, I think what's really important to remember is, to Rob's point earlier on, to put something like this on raw land, it does make us susceptible to that, something that possibly would be 700 units to be built. With this approach and this option, if it's 80 units at the most near the Curtis, that's doable. For us some towns are actually putting it on raw land, like up towards of 600 units, and that's a lot for a town to take on, and I just think this is a smart approach.
And that town may want more development. That
Right.
could be
Right.
the intent that they
Right.
want. Yeah.
Right.
But yes, oh, yes. Yes.
I was just wondering how, Wall Street and a new proposal came up for a development down at the end of Dixon Street to run out to Valley View. Do these, acres also add into this,
No,
MBTA?
no.
Separate. Don't-
Yeah,
No,
no,
not at
they,
all.
they are separate and, I mean, we could potentially consider them if we wanted to as a subcommittee, but we are not at the moment. So those developments have nothing to do with what we're doing now. Yep, yes.
When I first heard about this, it almost sounded like the sky was falling. The police department didn't like it, the fire department didn't like it, the DPW didn't like it. Now it almost sounds too good to be true, and I get nervous when it sounds too good to be true.
Yes.
But this plan of like we're talking with the overlay or whatever, is that within the original plan? And we just misunderstood it?
I
Or was
believe
this
so.
an add-on?
No, I believe we just misinterpreted it. So we had gotten a grant to hire a consultant who's worked with, what, 7 other towns, including Medway. And she's the expert. She's running all of the models. She's inputting all of the zoning requirements that we need. And, you know, she has worked with a number of towns and said that this is possible, this is allowable. It's not to say we don't get to the end of the line and the Attorney General doesn't come back with some issue, but if we can get a plan together relatively soon, we can preview this with the Attorney General and they can kind of give their thumbs up or thumbs down. And if we have to go back to the drawing board before October, we can do that and get a preliminary read from the Attorney General. So the consultant has really educated us on this entire process.
And I
which
think
has
that
been great.
consultants are learning too, so, you know, keep in mind that this was a mandate that came down, so it's a new mandate, so many towns are reconfiguring what maybe they thought based on, I mean, some of even the exemptions have changed and things have changed legislation wise with this mandate. And so our consultant was great that said, yes, you can do this option, but I think we all feel until we get that technical memo that says, absolutely, this is good. You know, it's good for us to have other options until we get that technical memo. And it might change a little bit based on the compliance model that has to be run, but just know that this is new for this subcommittee too, that we're trying to read the law, which we must comply with to get the grants and everything that the town really needs to sustain the things that we need to do project-wise within the town. So be patient with us. We're trying our best to just get the options that will be the best for Bellingham.
As we work through this process, we decided to put things off to the November meeting to see how things would go for the town meeting. This gives us the opportunity to take credit for what's here right now to some degree, and also the least impact to the town. So if this gets approved by the Attorney General, it could be very viable for the town of Bellingham.
Well,
Not like the sky's falling, like it was 6 months ago when all this.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we're not quite getting credit for those units. It's just that we are banking on the fact that the developer's not going to tear them down and build something nicer. Yes, Nick.
The parcel that's next to the Charles, I understand a fraction of it is actually buildable. Is it reasonable to expect that somebody might purchase that and develop it separate from the Charles? Is there room?
And that's what the consultant will look at to see how developable it is and how many units could be squeezed in there. So certainly that's something to look at. Nick. It's that we should know all of our exposure.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
you know, we know our exposure is 750 units. Are they gonna be able to cram in an extra 150 there or something? Yeah, we need to understand that as well, so.
Yeah.
I think these units are on paper.
Yes.
So does that mean that, because when we heard the 750 units that we had to have, so now that you're doing the overlay, are we still gonna be responsible for 750 units?
Well,
That
that's
was
what's
scary.
allowed to be built based on the density of the overlay.
But it
So,
doesn't mean we have,
no.
oh,
And someone could come in, even if their parcel falls under the overlay, even if they're allowed to build up to 15 units per acre, they could still build 2 units per acre, 1 unit per acre. It all depends. It's just they're allowed to build up to the 15 per unit or 15 unit per acre. I mean, obviously a developer would probably build to the max because that's what developers do, but they don't have to.
and we would still be compliant?
Yes. And a developer could never build these and we'd still be compliant as long as the Attorney General approves the overlay district, and it is accepted at town meeting.
It will sit there. If, you know, as long as it has to. It overlays on that district. And again, this all happened in the past.
Yes, lots of revelations in the last 3
2 weeks.
weeks, yes.
And we apologize if you weren't at the meeting. It came out at the last meeting.
We couldn't be here, but, yeah, no,
So thank you for
happy to keep answering
And
questions.
please communicate it to the, the outside entity that you're, just that you might be hearing things different. It's so important that you come to these meetings.
Oh, it is, yes, yeah.
And keep coming.
We try.
Good.
So with that, do we want to have the other members of the audience introduce themselves?
Yeah.
In the back.
Should I come up, Brian?
Sure.
So my name is Peter Harkey, and I'm a resident of Millis. And I want to introduce a piece of property that we own and also introduce myself because you don't know me. So I understand this whole thing is so fluid, and I've actually been going to meetings and learning myself, but I knew it was from what research I had done, it's going to be changing a lot. And I didn't want to put any extra pressure on the board, so I waited for a long time. But as far as options, and we don't really know what the Attorney General was gonna say, that's why I wanted to at least introduce the piece of property
Sure.
and myself, so you have a little background about me and my family. So the property that we own is about, we get 2 separate tax bills on it, and it's 30 acres total. And it's basically a big rectangle behind, Larry's Liquors in North Bellingham and the gas station. So that was cut out of the rectangle. So it's on the corner of North Main and Hartford. So I say I think we've had to have owned it for 50 years. So my relationship, my family's relationship to Bellingham, my dad was a builder. He's passed away many years ago, but he had built some homes in Bellingham. And at that time, that's when they had purchased this land. My family history, just so you get an idea of what so I told you, we live in Millis. And so all my grandparents were from Ukraine, so they were all farmers and they liked land. So all my relatives just bought land because where they came from, the land was taken away from them. So we owned a lot of land. And my family, we've tried to do, I know sometimes developers or landowners are presented as though that they care about making the most money. So that's why I wanted to introduce myself, and you can verify this. So we had a piece of land in Franklin, and we worked with the town of Franklin and we put a school there. That's I think on Lincoln Street, the Helen Keller School, I think it is. In Millbury, we owned about 30 acres of land, and the developer wanted it. The town needed a place. They actually had to put a sewer station on our land, so we gave that to the town. And we decided to give that land to the Conservation Commission, the town of Millbury. In my town of Millis, we gave about, well, this was actually more of a force taken. The Army Corps of Engineers took about 70 acres of our land to protect the water for everyone downstream all the way to Boston. And here in Bellingham, I came to a meeting with Jeremy Scott, it's his company's WS Development, when they were putting their plaza in. I was just like in the back of the meeting and no one knew who I was. And the town kept insisting, I think it was the planning board, they wanted a second entrance to that plaza. They thought it was necessity, and the big shots and all the suits were saying, no, there is no second entrance. And I just listened, and at the end, I gave them my phone number, and I said, have the boss call me. And then that was Jeremy Sklar, who I don't know if you've been dealing with him, but I know you've been dealing with his company. And then he sent out some of his people in suits. And I told him, let's make a deal. It makes sense. You know, the town wants it, you want it, we'll give you a good deal. It seems like the right thing to do. And of course, the suit guys were just, they almost blew up the whole deal. And then I said, I'm done. And I just called Jeremy, I says, let's just get this done. And I think 2 short little meetings and the town of Bellingham, we got the town of Bellingham involved. And that's why you have those 2 entrances and the Outback Steakhouse. We did not get very much money. The one thing I did ask Jeremy to do is someday something's gonna happen with the piece of property across the street. It's listed as Hartford Realty Trust. And so I had Jeremy put a sewer stub already over to the property. So the land has been vacant all these years, trying to see what would make sense for that piece of property, the right thing. 2 years ago, I met with the town administrator and the town planner, Mr. Kupfer.
Yep.
Yep. And this is why I think you should know about the parcel, because the company came to us and I have the name in my pocket. Anyhow, they wanted to see if it was feasible for a friendly 40B. Because it was so close to 495 and it made sense. That's why I wanted to present it to as a possibility. And but in the meetings, it was, you guys had already, we learned you'd already hit basically your number of 40B. So it was not going to be feasible. It was a pleasant meeting and very informative. And so we've tried different things, but nothing has ever worked. But I wanted to at least introduce the property and the 30 acres. It is just under 1 ownership. As I say, it's 2 tax bills. It is contiguous. And I know there are some landowners that, you know, making the most money is the most important. I'm just trying to convey to you my family history. That's, you know, and you can make any phone calls you want. That's just, it's not the case. So if things don't work out and you want to consider it, or, you know, consider who you're doing business with, we have a, you know, a long history of trying to do the right thing and not necessarily make the most money. So I have back, we have plans of it. You know, the plans are a while ago, but they did the, you know, the Conservation Commission had walked the land and flagged it all. And the, that's it. They have one of those, the plans in NRAD. So if your consultant ever wants to reach out to me or any, I have access to that. And, or any information that we have, I'd be glad to share with you, but at least I wanted to introduce you because it's very frustrating. And Millis is the same thing to me. It's so wrong what the state is forcing all the towns to do with our school. My wife works in the school system and, you know, Millis is, it just doesn't seem right to me. And so if you get in a position where things don't work out like this plan, I just want to make sure you understand that there's this piece of property and us, if willing to work with the town, if it gets to that.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming in. Any comments?
Thank you.
Okay.
But Mr. Hockey's always been, we were looking at that site at one point in time as a possibility for stormwater treatment, but as it turned out, we're able to put it across the street as part of the WS project. So as part, I shouldn't say WS project, as part of the infrastructure roadway improvements. As it turned out, we're not going to be utilizing that.
Yeah, but however, and then another thing, I know the road, the construction, the road is a big problem up there with the traffic and stuff. But if the funding continues, the town continues to get the funding. I know there's projects in both directions from heading towards Jeremy's other plaza and also all the way towards Mendon, which would then the site all of a sudden even becomes more viable for access for someday in the future that actually are going to be roads there that would be wide. And they're probably going to have to come and take some of the land
Right.
On one of those projects also, because we own on that side.
Right.
So they're not going to use it for this project, but I suspect it's probably going to need it in the future. just being
Well, thank
practical
you. I
and
appreciate
logical.
the feedback.
Can I encourage you to keep coming to meetings?
Sure. You know, like everyone else was,
Or you
you
can-
know, there's
or you
always
can
health
zoom in.
issues and stuff
Zoom in.
going on, you
Or you
know.
can zoom in,
I did that,
Please,
I wasn't very good at it, but yeah,
participate.
sure, and it's, as I say, it's very frustrating to see the state, basically, put undue pressure on towns. It's very, very frustrating. So, but I just wanted to make sure you knew about this piece of land and knew about, a little about us.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And then, do we need to hear from Mr. Moore?
Did you wanna,
I feel like you're the one who told us about your site in a different meeting, yeah.
I wonder if there was any requirements for senior housing in this.
No, unfortunately, it's all supposed to be market rate, although you can require up to 10% affordable housing, which as we know is, you know, that's not true senior housing. So I think, yeah, the goal is just to build more market rate housing without restriction.
And not to mention, just to add on to that, the requirements are that this is zoned by right, which that really limits the town's ability to really craft what kind of housing is gonna go in to this overlay. I wish that there was a way to do it creatively. It's extremely difficult when these are by right, not even special permit. We can't really put any criteria into exactly what the town wants to see for that housing. But
In essence, they're tying our hands to a great degree.
yeah. I do think that is definitely a discussion that should happen down the road though, because I know it's a situation that has been brought up multiple times in the past few years. And, you know, it's something that I think most towns are having issues with senior housing shortages, and it is a serious issue, and it's something that needs to be taken care of. Unfortunately, with the MBTA overlay, it's not exactly feasible for this type of situation, but
As we go down the road, we're gonna explore options outside of this.
Okay, with that, do we want to talk about any other parcels? I know last meeting we mentioned the Bellingham Plaza. Sahan, sent Amy a note about that, so that is the retail center that's just over that way, behind the Dairy Queen. I personally thought it might be a good option to include in the overlay, and Dennis or Amy, do you know, can we have more than 50 acres?
Yes, I
Okay.
mean, we can't have more than 50 acres. I think as long as the density of the developable property
Is the average
generates
is
750, minimum of 50 acres, and it has to generate that density of housing.
Got it.
So
Um,
it can't be, for instance, it can't be 200 acres at, 5 units per acre. It's gotta
Yeah,
be,
yeah,
you
okay.
know, there, I think, as Sarah at the last meeting had said, it's got to be at least a combination. If you don't want to do all 15 units per acre, then, half could be 10 and half could be 20 units per
Right,
acre.
right.
But it has to, blended
Average.
rate has to be 15 per, so.
I'm in agreement on that.
About
We should look at
The
it.
shopping plaza. I know Rob had some reservations about it, but I'll just kind of talk about why I'm thinking it might be a good option to look at. Only because I feel like that area is strangely developed. First of all, you've got the single family home, the Dairy Queen, some empty retail, those houses along Mill Street, which are probably commercially zoned. And then you have the parking and then the retail in the back. Now that the Family Dollar is closing, I don't know if everyone knew that. I feel like it's fairly empty. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I mean, it's empty-ish. And, so I think it's an interesting parcel to look at because it is right downtown and is, a representative of kind of our center, so to speak. The MBTA rail line, I do believe goes back behind there. I know Jim, a few years ago talked about maybe trying to convince the MBTA to expand the commuter rail down there. So it's an option to do maybe, or allow for housing on top, retail on the bottom. There seems to be good parking there, and then I believe when Red Mill starts building, the road will eventually connect over this way, but on Mill Street. Am I remembering correctly?
It will come out to Mill and it'll also come out to the town center.
Right, so I mean, I guess accessibility will be increased when that development is done and the road is connected. So those are my reasonings for looking to explore this parcel, but I'll let Rob kind of play devil's advocate here.
Can you just add to what you're saying?
Yes,
I think it gives us an opportunity to enhance the downtown
potentially, yes.
potential. And make some improvements. And that, is worthwhile exploring.
Yes, I agree.
Is it my turn?
Yes, Rob, please rain on our parade. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Way to call me out, my goodness. Look, I'm in complete agreement that it's a good idea, because I do agree that the center of town could use some work, especially because I do feel like our town common is beautiful.
Mhm.
Our new municipal town hall complex is very nice, and it just seems like that's sort of an eyesore, and it just so happens to take up about 50% of the downtown area of Bellingham. So, I'm in agreement. It seems like everybody on this subcommittee agrees that it would be nice to include that area in some type of overlay. And just out of curiosity, I know that we have a pretty nice group of people in the crowd at this meeting. Just wondering if the feedback of the people in the audience would like to see some improvements to the town center. I can't really tell. My screen's kind of blurry.
They're shaking their head, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really good to hear. All right. So I guess this would be my approach personally. I really like the idea of the two areas that we've kind of calculated, or that we want to see if it will work with our model and get our density. Regarding the center of town, I love the idea of doing something zoning wise for the downtown area. I don't know if I would necessarily want to lump it into the MBTA overlay just because it's by right. And that opens up issues, because if it's by right, there are approval criterias for this. However, it does limit the town's ability and the board's ability to vet the process and try and get exactly what you want from a developer, and to really make something aesthetically pleasing that's really going to work for the town. With that being said, I would urge the town maybe to start looking into creating a different overlay that we could do some type of mixed use for that area, but I would do it separate from the MBTA overlay. That would be my recommendation.
Yes.
That gives us more control.
Yeah, so.
Well, that's exactly it, because if what my concern is we can craft something, and it's going to be a lot of work too, to get the zoning language correct, to just try and put some type of safeguards in place, even if it's by right. I mean, you can be creative, you can do it. It's just going to be tricky, and it's going to take a lot of work. And I don't think that our consultant, I don't know if that would be even included in their proposal. So it would rely heavily on us as the subcommittee, which, I mean, I'm willing to, if the town wants to do that, I'd be willing to put the work in to do it. I just think that it would make more sense to focus on those other two areas. If we can get it into a different overlay that does require a special permit and that does have some type of safeguard, similar to what we did with the Hartford Ave overlay, that basically in the approval criteria states that it needs to be aesthetically pleasing, that would be a better option in my opinion.
Yeah, so I think when Rob, you and I had talked about this, the concern was that we would lack the control to have something nice put there, right? Because I know there wouldn't be any design criteria that we could put in. So if we're envisioning some nice multifamily units with retail below and nice parking, a developer could come in and just put something that looks like a Soviet block housing, and we wouldn't have any recourse to require them to put something that looks nicer. So I definitely understand the concern there by putting this under the MBTA communities overlay, which limits what the town can do, or the board can do with an applicant.
And it's such a high visibility area that if it did go bad, it would be really bad potentially for the town. I mean, that is our town center. And like you said, I mean, if somebody's gonna put up, I mean, even you look at the Curtis Apartments, for example, or the Charles, both of those buildings, I think they look nice where they are. But if you took those and placed them in the center of town, it's not going to be received well, I don't think. And I know me personally, I don't think I would want that in the town center. I don't think that would really meet the intent of what we're trying to do. And, you know, we can put safeguards in place as far as building height and making sure that, you know, it's only 2 stories, first floor is commercial, second floor is residential, you know, who knows, but I would just be cautious about it simply because it is by right. And I think that there's a great opportunity to work on that area. I just don't think that this would be the correct application to do it.
I know.
I have rained on your parade, haven't I?
No, you haven't. No, because if we're gonna do something, we want to have as much control on it as we can.
Yeah, it's very big.
And if it's by right, we lose that control.
Yeah.
So I would think, you know, that in the future, we may want to look at a mixed use overlay for that area. And you develop it correctly, do it slowly. And maybe a year or 2 from now, look at a presentation to the town for an overlay district like we did for Hartford Avenue. I don't think it's that this simple.
And to that point, there are also other towns that have utilized overlays in specific zones for senior housing, which is another item that can be looked at too. I mean, this is down the road. This is a lot of work that needs to be done. But you know, I think these are the better options because you just open yourself up to so many issues if something is by right, especially if you're really trying to craft something specific. So
Got it.
once again, I apologize for raining on your parade.
No, I appreciate it, Rob. Thank you. And hopefully we can, or Sahan will see all this in the meeting minutes, but we can kind of relay some of the thoughts. But there was a question from the audience.
Yeah, I was on the registry of deeds, and I was just curious about the deeding of Wall Street, and I stumbled across this, I guess you'd just partition in the deeds, where I started in 1917 to present day. There is a lot of tax properties in town that don't seem to have ever been sold. I don't know if anybody's ever researched that. It could be small lots scattered, or it could be a bunch of them that are, you know, like a section of Weathersfield. I'm just using that as an example, not a project. And if there's areas like that that come together and the town already owns them and they're not controlled by conservation, it may be an area where there's some usable land.
So to that point, I believe the regulations state that it cannot be municipally owned parcels
Or the overlay
for
district.
the overlay
You
that
could
we.
deal
it
with
would
a
ha-
person like Mr. Harkey here and let him buy it.
That's,
Yeah.
I think that's more of a planning board issue right now. 'Cause you're talking about Wall Street development.
Well, no, he's saying that there are town-owned sites
Yes.
that we could combine potentially, or could be combined by a buyer if we put an overlay district over some of them.
I just wanted to see if Wall Street had a total deed to both parcels of land.
Oh, okay.
Which I found out they didn't. And, well, not where I could find it. I checked the land deeds. I checked, just about every type of deed there is, there's 4 types. And, that upper parcel up near Lake Ave is not deeded to Wall Street.
No, it's a town of Bellingham parcel, right? It's a parcel owned by there is a parcel there, a large parcel there between the landfill and between, the developer's property. That's conservation land, you know, a large parcel.
He owns the lower part along Prospect Shore.
Yeah,
He doesn't own the part up by Lake Ave.
okay, I know the town.
Yeah,
owns
that's
it.
a heart-shaped parcel.
He's coming back on May 14th, I believe.
Yeah, I didn't mean to bring this up as a separate issue.
It's fine.
I was using that for my lead into the tax held land.
Mm.
Okay. I would suggest, I'm on the planning board. I would suggest if you want, please attend the meeting. I believe it's May 14th. That's the next time we'll be discussing that development. And you can bring that up. I know he gave us a binder 2 meetings ago outlining what his research has indicated, but feel free to come up and raise that question.
Yeah, Bill, I think the
I asked him
question
when he
is,
was here last time, if he had a clean title, and he said, yes, he did.
Well, we can,
We'll iron that out later.
correct.
that's a planning board public hearing thing. I don't think we should be discussing
Yeah.
the review that.
And, well, I think then Bill on the planning board would iron it out later.
Yeah, it's something that's not the realm of this board.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand.
No, but I
Talking
appreciate the
about the fair-
suggestion. Yeah, I
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
the
you.
suggestion. That is something we can definitely look into. So now I guess, you know, we've got about half an hour before the planning board meeting starts. I think next steps are, you're gonna talk to Sarah from the consultants about suggestions for parcels. She'll run the analysis. We can spend a few minutes talking about other parcels, or if people have other suggestions that they wanna look into, but I think the biggest next step is just, if we're all in agreement, move forward with the parcels that Dennis presented today with the consultant, but, happy to discuss other options in town if we want to. I don't have any other suggestions. I think, you know, we're going down a good path to comply. And I think the feedback that we've gotten from, you know, the public and everyone else is that it would be ideal to try to limit the impacts of this overlay district on the town while still complying. So I think that this path does that. But if we do want to add more housing or do something different, obviously we can explore those options as well.
Do you want me to, it seems like everybody's comfortable right now with option 1. So, and option 2 was obviously the shopping. So if we took option 1, which we discussed, I could have her run the compliance for our next meeting. I mean, I would think she should have that by our next meeting with possibly a technical memo. And then at that point, we should know if we're in good standings with that.
Yeah.
If you want me to do that, and then at that point, if we're deficit in some areas, I think at that point we could bring in, you know, possibly different parcels to support However, that technical memo comes with that option.
And
If you'd
it
like me to
is,
do that.
and could we ask Sarah if the technical memo is enough to provide preliminary results to the Attorney General? Like, what do we need?
That pre-read?
Yeah,
The problem with the pre-read, and I think she said this at the last meeting, is they're so backed up right now
oh, okay.
that I would assume if our technical memo comes back that if we're 99% good with that, I would feel comfortable with that. But if it comes back, well, we're maybe 50%, then I think then we bring in other options. But at this point, I think, maybe if everybody's comfortable, we go with this option, see what the technical memo says. If she says maybe you need to pull in a few more parcels, then at that point, we can look at different parcels, maybe to add to that option one. But Rob, I don't know what your take is on that.
No, I like that approach. I think, if we can get the, something that we believe complies and submit it for that pre-review from the Attorney General, even if they're backed up and they can't review it, so be it. We at least have enough to roll with it. And, I think that this approach is a really good option. I understand that there's a lot of concerns in town, based on, if you look at the social media feeds, you will see that there is a lot of information that's getting spewed, I would say, towards this. And I think that based on the concerns that have been noted, I think this addresses a majority of them. So
I believe the approach that you guys are using as a subcommittee is phenomenal. The approach you're using is not encouraging the production. And I think whatever's out there on social media, I don't have it. I think, and I don't want to have the social media, but when you look at what we're doing, we are controlling any production that could take place. And I think we're designating in a very smart way. And when people look at what this mandate is, the committee has thought very particular with which parcels we can add in a way that we're not going to be hit with a huge production of units, but we're using existing on site. And I just think that that's very important to know. That good approach.
I think we'll proceed with this option until roadblocks come up, and hopefully they don't come up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just wanted to open it up in case anyone had other thoughts or felt strongly about including other parcels in the overlay. But it sounds like we're all in agreement, and based on Sahan's comments from last meeting, I presume he's in the same agreement with all of us. So I think that should be the approach we take. And, I am still a little nervous. We'll get to the finish line and the Attorney General will say, oh, well, you're not really, encouraging enough production. But if every town is not every town, but if enough towns are doing this and taking the same approach, I'm hoping there's strength in numbers, I guess. And I guess we'll just
And we
deal
won't know
with
until
that.
we get that.
We'll deal with that
technical
when the time comes.
Right.
Okay, so with that, any other comments or questions from the public, the audience, online?
Just
Yes.
one. Have our planning board been in contact with the neighboring planning boards and see how they're handling it?
Yes, well, I know Rob, does meetings in other towns and has talked with the head of planning in a couple of the neighboring towns. I know our consultant has worked with a number of neighboring towns and has relayed information. There's also, I obviously read about real estate news all the time, so there's a lot of towns who've actually publicly come out and said what they're doing. And it's been picked up by the media, and they've been very vocal about, either non-compliance or making it difficult for production to occur and still be in compliance.
Thank you.
Amy, you were supposed to be part of a
You're
meeting
welcome.
that got canceled. Wasn't there a meeting that got canceled for the regional people?
Oh,
Oh, yeah, they
yes,
can
there
be.
was gonna be a
So that's being
legislation
rescheduled.
breakfast, right, that they were gonna be discussing this, absolutely, and that's rescheduled to May 10th.
So there's a meeting coming up in May where a lot of planning, different towns will be getting together to exchange their opinions on what they're doing. So yes, it's being done.
And the difficulty is too, because I haven't actually talked to, well, I've talked to some planning boards, but The issue is with this, or the issue that I find with this is that it's pretty much a one size fits all requirement for the towns. So one thing that I have noticed is that because each town it varies so greatly as far as how I would say the existing development and development that's in the works in these towns. It's been really interesting to follow what each town has been trying to put forth as a solution. Like I know 2 weeks ago I was in Medway for that planning board. So I did see, I think they were trying to put their overlay on raw land, which I thought was kind of interesting. It did not seem to be received very well by the public. So they're doing a different approach, and it's very difficult because if you look at our solution and you look at what we have in Bellingham, you look at what Franklin has, you look at what Medway has, we're just so different in so many ways.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And it's so hard to apply other communities' solutions with what Bellingham's doing. That's why I actually really like what we're coming up with, because I think it does meet the intent and kind of we're trying to work with what we have for existing infrastructure and existing development, because we're in a very difficult position on the subcommittee where we really don't want to put Bellingham at risk to lose their grants, but we also don't want to put Bellingham at risk to get these enormous developments in place that's really going to hinder our infrastructure, our services, and just citizens in general. So, other towns seem to be doing a different approach. It's very, very interesting how this is panning out. I've just rambled. I don't know if I really answered anything. You know, you have the option if you wanted to. So,
So to answer your question, our town meeting's taking place in November. A lot of town meetings on this will take place in the spring. So it's gonna be very interesting to watch and see what other towns do.
That was my point.
As we go through this process, being in November, we're gonna be able to make adjustments if we have to, based on what other towns have done. So I think
It's
that's
not
the benefit.
following their procedures, it's following their methods.
Correct. Learning what works and doesn't work. So I think that's
Yes.
the advantage of going in November. So you'll see a lot of other towns coming up in May and June.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of the towns that are currently in or have put forth a plan because they were meant to be in compliance earlier than us have rapid transit in their towns, which is different than us, and their criteria is different. Although I was an event where someone from the planning board in Lexington and they're an adjacent community, I believe, like us, and they overachievers already put forth their plan and got it approved. But they were, for the most part, encouraging more development and in surrounding, I think, specific areas in their downtown. And Lexington is obviously a much different community than we are. So I think you'll find that everyone will do their best to find something that fits for their town and still meets the criteria. Okay, with that, I feel we're ready to close the
Want to
meeting.
accept the minutes?
Can we choose the next meeting date?
Yes. So April's gonna be a little tough, but,
Do we
how
want to wait, and this might be too long, but I was thinking maybe do April 25th. Before, that gives a month for the consultant to look at the compliance modeling. I know that they're very busy right now with town meetings, and it will give her time to get us our technical
No,
memo.
'cause that works for me because I am traveling the week of the 10th, and then the following week is spring break for school, so the 25th works better for me. Rob, does the 25th work for you?
yeah, the 25th should work for me.
Okay, at 5:30? Okay.
It's fine.
Isn't it? We're gonna have a busy night, I
I
know,
know.
but yeah, I just feel like we need to give her a month to the consultant to get that to us.
Pizza for that night?
Okay,
Oh,
so
I know why Bill's complaining.
we'll meet on April 25th then, at
Okay.
5:30.
Perfect.
Okay. And if you want, we can wait and do the minutes when we have a full board here.
To do the
That's,
minutes today.
oh, or do them tonight, that's fine too.
We have a forum?
With Rob zooming in. we can-
Okay, you can.
Yes,
Sure, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our March 7th meeting.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, please, roll call aye.
I will call a lie.
Liz
Rob
Bartlett, aye.
Lucier, aye.
Okay, okay, and do we need a motion to close the meeting?
I do.
I will call a motion to close the meeting.
I will second
All in favor, please roll call aye.
it. Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rob.